So how do you correlate stunting with what happens to brain development? A scientist from Harvard, this was a slide which was found in the World Development Report. A scientist from Harvard took 2 MRIs of 2 babies aged 2 months old in Bangladesh. The one on the left is the brain scan of a stunted child, and the one on the right. Neuron development, it's just the number of neurons developed. And this is of a 2-month-old baby. So the first thing that we need to do is to realize that to stop stunting, you have to look at the mothers, and you have to see what's going on with the mothers. Next. The other thing that Nipun talked about, so James Heckman, who's a Nobel laureate from the University of Chicago, actually won his Nobel Prize simply for this slide, which is that he showed that if you want to invest in human development, you need to do it as early as possible. The greatest returns are, when you invest earlier rather than later. Unfortunately, what we tend to do is roughly the opposite. Next. You don't need to read the text, but just read the early childhood development drives success in school and life. This is what we said we're going to catch on to. What can we do to help? Solving poverty is a huge problem, requiring too many players and too many things to happen at the same time. But what can we do to give a poor child, once the child has been born and has come on earth, how do you help a poor child to get a better chance in life? That's something that I think one can try to address. Next. So, as I said, the Karnataka. So, this was the National Family Health Survey. I'm sorry, there's something wonky about the text there. But data since then has come, and I'll share that. That's happier data as a result of our interventions. But at the point where we started, Karnataka is in the bright blue right there, 36.2% of children in Karnataka malnourished and stunted. This is a matter of great concern. It should actually concern every thinking individual, all of us, because what's happening to even the people who are going to work for us, and to put it in a very crude terms, even our workforce in coming years needs to be healthy and well-nourished if they're going to be able to work. And just in terms of justice and equality and so many right-thinking people, we should be concerned about this. Next. Some other examples. So this data this slide shows the comparison between the previous data. Previous National Family Health Survey showed that there was clearly some impact and stunting rates were coming down. Wasting rates had gone up. I'll come back to this. Anemia among women had come down, and low birth weight. Low birth weight again, low birth weight of 20%. Birth weight of 2.5 kilos is regarded as good, healthy birth weight. But anything below that leaves a child particularly vulnerable to all kinds of problems. Wasting had gone up over the period from 2005 to 2015, and this should be of great concern to a drought-prone state like Karnataka. There were particularly acute droughts in 13-14, 15-16. These affected the nutrition of... So the difference between stunting and wasting is that wasting is chronic malnutrition, and stunting is severe malnutrition. Wasting is something that's called the slow road to mortality. Next. And I talked about the first 1,000 days that we need to start before a child is born, all the way up to when the child is 2 years old. Because if you look at this slide, this again is from Charles Nelson, the Harvard neuroscientist. If you look at this slide, it shows you that the sensory pathways, language development, higher cognitive functions are all happening starting from before the child is born all the way into the first year. And if we haven't given the child a good, and the child's mother, good care, good antenatal care in the first 1,000 days, then we're really condemning them to all kinds of problems later. We're also condemning the country to all. Next. So one of the things, just go back, please. Very briefly, ICDS had a program of providing food to children once a day, to the children between 3 and 6 who come to the Anganwadis. 66,000 Anganwadis, 15 lakh, yeah. 15 lakh children coming to the Anganwadis, and 40 lakh children being reached at home, children below the age of 3, all right? Being reached at home with milk, with dry rations for complementary feeding, and pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers also being given dry rations. So this was the first problem that we saw. We found that pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers were not eating those dry rations because there were problems of pilferage, leakage, all sorts of problems. And we said that we would re-engineer next, do a process re-engineering to bring them to the Anganwadis and serve hot meals to them. That would be the first thing that we would do. That was the intervention that we did. We decided also to layer a bunch of health interventions. I'm rushing through these slides, but I need you to see this because this tells you how complex these problems are and how we need to actually get into it and understand it if we're going to solve any one of these. You know, it's important, if 40% of the pregnant women have anemia, if 60% of children being born have anemia, IFA is a very important intervention. But the quality of IFA tablets, the side effects of IFA tablets is something that's a problem. Calcium, deworming, again, reaching medicated mosquito nets, all of these. Growth monitoring, again, is an important part of. We found that we weren't even measuring the height. Height is an accurate predictor of later outcomes, but we weren't even, the program wasn't even measuring the height. Happy to say that Karnataka was the first state which started measuring the height of children regularly every month from 2016 onwards. Next. And of course, we came up with a bunch of effectiveness indicators. Just getting all this data, again, takes a lot of time, but you need to identify exactly the indicators which will tell you whether it's working. Next. Next. Yeah, now just to show you pictures from Karnataka's Anganwadis. As I said, 1 in 5 women, so teenage pregnancy again is a big problem in Karnataka. 40% of girls were getting married in till 2005, 40% of girls were getting married before the age of 18. That number, that percentage came down to 24% by 2015. 24% still means 1 out of every 4 girls. That's still declining, but that's another problem. When teenage pregnancy, child marriage shows that girls are dropping out of school, getting married, having children before they can nourish them properly, losing out on their own potential as productive members of the workforce, leads to other problems, including domestic violence, all sorts of problems. Next. And again, as I said, low birth weight, 20% of babies. Nearly 2/3 of low birth weight babies have what is called IUGR, intrauterine growth retardation. Malnourished mothers thus perpetuate the intergenerational cycle of malnutrition, and we needed to break this cycle. That was our problem. That was the thing that we were looking to solve. Next. These are all pictures from Karnataka's Anganwadis. You can see how these children are, you know, just exactly like any other children. They're not different from any of us. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say this, but sometimes we forget these things, and all these are pictures from our actual Anganwadis taken during our program. So as I said, regional imbalances, drought years, 23% married before the age of 18, a life cycle approach. We said that if you have to solve something, so the first thing is that you can't compartmentalize a problem into boxes, and you need to sometimes take a life cycle approach when you're dealing with social problems. You need to look at teenage girls, you need to look at what's driving them out of school, you need to look at ways to bring them back into school, you need to look at ways in which you can amend the child marriage legislation, but an amendment itself is not sufficient unless you actually convince the parents, unless you maybe do a cash transfer to help girls to reach school, unless you change bus timings, unless you give girls an additional incentive by the time they reach standard 10. So, yes, next. And as I said, the ICDS since 1975, coverage of 5 million, 1.25 lakh workforce of workers and helpers. This is both an advantage and in some ways an issue, because their honorarium, they are not permanent employees, their honorarium is very small, they are themselves among the poorest of women, their problems themselves need to be solved. 66,000 Anganwadis, only 41,000 had their own buildings, others were running in various places, some were running in the open, all sorts of problems. We started looking at how we could. So what I'm saying is you need a multi-sectoral approach. You need to be simultaneously building toilets, you need to be building buildings, you need to be providing water, you need to be changing your modes of delivery. You need to be doing many, many things at the same time because those children deserve it. Next. Nutrition intervention. So we often think that if you need to solve malnutrition, you need to do a nutrition intervention. Direct nutrition, DNIs are important. Direct nutrition interventions are important. They're very important. There are no solutions without direct nutrition intervention. So we're giving milk. Karnataka, despite its drought, is the second largest milk producer in the country. And we provide milk 5 days a week to 1 crore children every day. It's a huge program. Many of us don't know about it. We've started this in 2013. It's a huge and tremendously successful program. Provides valuable calcium and protein. We started providing eggs for severely malnourished children, moderately malnourished children in 5 districts, found that was working. So you need to keep running with the data, you need to keep running with the program and keep changing it. We said we'd provide additional sprouts, eggs, height measurement, and so on. Next. But along with that, for the mothers as well. You need to ensure that the mothers are getting what they actually need. And we started this program as a hot meal program, but we found, I'd like you to look at the picture, we found that there were many, many unintended consequences which are also very beneficial. They started becoming friends, they started having social networks. Social networks, very important, affirming networks, very important for poor women in distress and in poverty. Next. This woman is a construction laborer in Yadgir. There's a little child with her who doesn't come to the Anganwadi, but comes now because the mother comes, and there's a little baby in her lap. So women now getting milk, eggs, vegetables, dal, 4 sources of protein, as well as coverage, 8 lakh women. Health services convergence. You're not able to reach the woman in her home to check her blood pressure or to give her the IFA tablet. But if they come here, it becomes a gateway to many convergences. Now here is a potential. For example, we need frugal innovation to be able to check so that the woman doesn't have to travel all the way, losing her livelihood. For these poor women, a day's wages, Mahatma Gandhi Narega wages are 249 rupees a day. She can go and work, dig a hole, do a pit, whatever it is, for 249 rupees a day, which will allow her to buy a meal and feed her children as well. For her to have to go to the primary health center, she has to lose out on that day's wages. On the contrary, she has to spend money to take a bus and go. So can we think of frugal innovations further to what we already have to measure? This is one of the things I would say. Why should we not use 66? We have 2,500 primary health centers in the state, 9,000 sub-centers. But we have 66,000 Anganwadis. If 8 lakh women are coming to the Anganwadis, which is their closest to their home, and that's the first presence of the government in any village, why would you not want to find ways to measure their blood pressure, do a little prick to check their hemoglobin, maybe even check their urine sugar or blood sugar in the Anganwadi? You could decentralize that part of it, diagnosis, not treatment. The healthcare sector, rightly, will be very wary of decentralizing treatment to that level. But diagnosis needs to be decentralized, because then you can identify who are the women who are likely to have problems, who need a healthcare referral. That's one part of it. Next. And of course, this was the program we started bringing kitchens to Anganwadis, decentralized, a lot of training, a lot of LPG everywhere, double burner stoves. The attention to detail, one has to look at the big picture but simultaneously see detail, because labor-saving devices, these are things that we do. So what I'm trying to say is that our design has to be terribly empathetic. It has to be driven by empathy. If a woman is supposed to be teaching the children during the day, as well as caring for them, you're not going to ask her to cook twice by putting a pressure cooker twice on the stove, where you can provide a double burner stove and reduce her cooking time. These are small little interventions which actually make a big difference. Next. Going forward, of course, this was, I'm sorry, this slide is actually old and this presentation is a little dated, but many of these things we've already gone forward on. Some of this, we said we'd do weight monitoring, gestational weight gain monitoring. Women are supposed to gain 9 to 10 kilos during their 9 months of pregnancy, but they gain as little as 2 kilos without any nutrition intervention and without any monitoring. It's easily done in the tetanus injection, early registration, IFA compliance, calcium deworming, a facial recognition and tech platform for monitoring growth of the children, as well as presence of the mothers, different kinds of interventions for hard-to-reach segments. Next. As I said, many unintended benefits which are equally important, social networks, mental health gains for women, postpartum depression. It becomes a social audit. Early childhood education and stimulation is something that can be given attention to. They can be trained for effective parenting. Stimulation of young children who are below the age of 3 is an equally important intervention along with nutrition. Many poor parents, for want of our own services, have not really understood how they can stimulate children. Now, when we have children in our families, privileged people have ways of, snapping our fingers and so on and so forth, and stimulating our children and ensuring that they reach their milestones fast. This is again something where we can develop perhaps ways through technology to reach women with smartphones available, with more people having access to telephones, ways to reach women and men, to help them be more effective parents, because stimulation is something that no government can do for them, but no services can do, but has to be done in the home. Stimulation will also help to change gender norms within the family. Next. Yeah, and finally, this is my last slide. Finally, the big picture. We're doing all this not only to improve nutrition. This is a woman, a street vendor who we helped with one of our programs, who said that I'm doing this because my daughter shouldn't have to do this later. So I keep returning to this because the big picture is what we should look at. We're solving problems which are complicated, but they're going to lead to something which is very big, bigger than all of us. And this is why I congratulate all of you for organizing this, for coming together to do this, to think about it. And I'd like to say that on behalf of the government, we are ready to partner in whatever way with innovative ideas. But it does require a degree of getting into issues, understanding them. They're enormously interesting, and they deserve to be studied. They deserve to be studied in detail, not superficially. It shouldn't take time. It's not about the time. It's about the degree of attention that we give to these. Thank you.
Yes, clearly very rich in both data as well as in problems. But Uma, first of all, thank you for framing the overall scenario for us. The startups in the room and the entrepreneurs who you would like to get them engaged in some of these areas, and malnourishment is one example, early childhood education, etc. Could you drill this down a little bit and say, what are the examples of things that they should be helping with or they should be working on? I saw that thing about facial recognition. I know you're using cameras for capturing height and other parameters seamlessly. Any suggestions, Uma?
Yeah, thanks. We did realize that Anganwadi workers during a day are looking after 20 children. They're also having to feed the mothers. They're having to cook and feed the mothers and so on and so forth. We found that this was taking up a lot of their time, taking away from time that they could spend in early childhood education activities for the children. So we said that what if we gave them smartphones which could do. Basically, the principle was that the phone should do whatever technology can do, and the human being should do whatever the human being should be able to do, what technology cannot do, right? Because working with children requires a lot of patience, requires mentoring, requires reading aloud, requires helping them to nap, requires a lot of care because they're in the Anganwadi for 6.5 to 7 hours every day. So we started working with C-STEP, which is a technology think tank, which helped us to understand the problem in greater detail. They sent some students, they did some ethnographies in Anganwadis. We said that we want to reduce the drudgery first, because an Anganwadi worker should not be taking attendance and measuring height, measuring weight every day when technology can do that. So there's this Beautiful platform. The other thing is that we miss out. The reason why, when we have immunization which can cover 100% of our children, our data shows that we have 65 to 70% coverage. Independent surveys, right? Because the gaps are the children that we miss out. The children that we miss out are because health department is doing one set of surveys, the women and child department is doing another set of surveys. Some children just get missed out in between. So this platform actually helped us to bridge the two, because governments do work in silos, but frontline workers don't. They work together. So it helped us to bridge the two and bring them together. This is how we're rolling it out now in all districts. Neha.
Are there any questions from the audience? I have just maybe 1 minute up, 1 minute left. But is there anybody who wants to ask a question from the audience? All right. So, any last words, Uma, on I know the government is playing a very active role in working with startups in Karnataka, and that's been one of the hallmarks of the ecosystem here. Anything specific in this area, particularly that you would like to see happening, and for example, in pilots and other things like that, how is it that the government can help some of the entrepreneurs here, especially social entrepreneurs?
So as you know, we already have hackathons and we have pilots. Every department is open to doing pilots in solving some of the problems. Acute problems on our wish list, for example, are low-cost, robust initiatives, sustainable initiatives for menstrual hygiene. Menstrual cups are available for women, but for young girls who are below the age of 18, they need to use reusable, sustainable menstrual hygiene products. The other problem about menstrual hygiene is that we don't even, and these are problems that are easily solved. Incinerators in rural areas don't meet pollution control board norms because they're not achieving a certain temperature. Now that doesn't seem like a very difficult problem to solve, but that is something that would be required across the country. So these are the kinds of problems that people like me in different sectors would be able to, would share. And getting the community together to look at these problems, to go into the field, we could take them into the field, help out with pilots, try out what works, doesn't work, do baseline, do a midline, and then assess the impact later.
Good.
This
Thank you, Uma. There's been a lot of active social entrepreneurship engagement in Bangalore, in Karnataka, as well as across the country. So we will continue working with you. We'll continue getting ideas from you in terms of what problems are there to be solved and how can we actually partner together through organizations, through social incubators like Nudge, and through other industry bodies as well. So thank you for your support. Thank you for framing the problem as I wanted you to do. Thank you very much.